Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. I think we can start. And as you just mentioned, this session will be a little more interactive. So it's very important. And I assume you have installed MPOL and that MPOL is running with the test file that was shared with you. What is the topic today? We will be revising quickly the max flow problem that we introduced at the end of the previous session, if you remember. And why we're doing that? Because the max flow problem is the problem we are going to use today to introduce the concept of resilience based on robust optimization. So the idea is that we will be starting from the max flow problem and then look at it from the point of view of an attacker whose objective is to destroy the system, the network flow, and then the defender, so the person that is protecting components of the system to make the life harder to the attacker. And then we will be studying resilience in this framework and see how we can define resilience based on this problem. So I would say that the first step is to revise quickly the max flow. And as we shared last time, this is a very famous problem in optimization where the objective is to find the way to send as much flow as possible from a source node to a terminal node through a network. And as also we shared last time, variation of these basic problems can be found in several fields. For example, transportation is one of them, where you are looking at traffic problems, for example. The idea is that we have a network, and this is the network we are going to use today as well. We have the red node that is the source, and then we have the green node that is the terminal. And we can send goods. Again, what is the good is not important here. It can be oil, it can be water, it can be whatever. But the important thing is that we can send stuff from a node to the other using arcs. And if you see, arcs here have orientation. That means I can send something from node 2 to node 8 because the arc is pointing that direction, but I cannot send anything from node 8 to node 2. In this example, and also for the rest of this session, we are assuming, just to make the discussion easier, that each arc is characterized by a capacity of 10. It means that we can send no more than 10 units of whatever the good is. And 10 is the same for each arc. In practice, you may have different capacities, and this makes also the problem harder. But just to understand the concept, let's assume that every arc is associated with a capacity of 10. If you remember last time, we wrote this MPOL model. So this is the model of the max flow, where we define the parameters. That is, if you remember, a parameter is a number or an information, the data that we know before solving the problem. So how many nodes we have, what is the source and the terminal, and then we have the set of vertices, the set of arcs, the capacity that we set to 10. If you remember, the variable is the flow. So how much are we sending through each arc? And this notation here, f of a, means that we have a variable for each arc. We want to maximize the total flow. The total flow is what? Is either the sum of the flow going out from the source, or in an equivalent way, the amount of flow that is entering the terminal. In this case, is the sum of flow going out from the source. Then we have some constraints. Number one is the capacity bound. That means for each arc, we cannot exceed the maximum capacity. So the flow you see here is less than or equal to the capacity. And then we have the flow conservation. For each node that is not source or terminal, whatever is entering a node is equal to what is going out from the node, because we cannot create flow from nowhere. If we solve the problem with MPOL, the solution was this. Here we are printing the flow in each arc. You see some of them have a flow of 0, others have a flow of 10. And if we print that, we get this. The highlighted arcs are those for which the flow is 10, and the others 0. So the idea is that the objective function you see here, objective 30, means that we are able to send 30 units from source to terminal. And if you see here, we are sending 10 units from source to node 4 and then 4 to terminal, 10 units node 3 and then terminal, and other 10 units from node through node 9, right? So you send 10, 10, 10, and the total is 30. This is a recap of what we did last time. Is the max flow problem, a small example with a solution. And the next one, the next topic I want to discuss with you now is how can we, from the point of view of the attacker, disrupt the system. But before moving on, is there any question here? Is everything clear about the max flow and the idea of the problem? I mean, no need to know the details of this, is not really required, but at least the concept of what is the problem and what we are aiming at here should be clear. And if not, you can write in the chat. Attacking the system. Imagine now that you have the network that I showed you earlier, and then there is an attacker. And the objective of the attacker is to minimize the flow that you can send from the source to the terminal. How can the attacker do that? By destroying some of the arcs. So what does it mean? It means that if an arc is destroyed, for example, if we look at here, imagine that now attacker is destroying arc 4.7. So this happens before we send the flow, right? So the network is there, the attacker will destroy something. After the destruction, we are sending the flow on the disrupted network. But if, let's say, the attacker destroyed the arc 4.7, we cannot send anything here. It's like saying that the capacity of the destroyed arc is 0 instead of 10. For example, imagine that the attacker decides to destroy arc 4.7. How will the flow change? Well, in MPOL, as I said, we are representing the attack as capacity 0. So what can we do? We can use this command here that I highlighted in blue in the run file. And basically, this is setting a parameter to a new value. So by default, if you remember in the mod file, we say that every capacity is equal to 10. But in the run file here, we can say, well, the capacity of this arc that is destroyed now is 0. So what happens now if we solve the problem where the capacity of arc 4.7 is 0? That means this arc is destroyed, and now we need to solve the max flow on this disrupted network. Well, we can use the same run file with this new line and do the same, solve with Cplex and show the solution. Of course, what you would expect now is that 4.7, the flow in the arc 4.7 is 0. And this makes sense because we have a constraint saying that we cannot send more than the capacity. And because the capacity now is 0, we can only send 0. But the optimal solution is still 30. So we can assume by looking at this that something has been changed in the solution, and that's actually true. If you see here, previously we sent from 6 to 4 and 4 to 7, but now 4 to 7 that I show here in red is disrupted, so we cannot send anything here. So what is the optimal solution now, or at least one of the optimal solutions? We still send 10 units through through nodes 3 and 9, but now we are sending 10 units to node 4, then we go 4 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 8, and 8 to 7. In other words, we found another way to send the 10 units that reach node 4. We are not using the arc 4.7, but we are using an alternative set of arcs. You may ask, hey, why don't you send through node 5 and 8? So 6 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 8, 8 to 7. It's also possible. The thing is that here, when you solve an optimization problem, usually you find one solution. If there are different solutions that are still optimal, that means they give you the same objective function value, usually the solver selects one. They are called symmetric solution. This is another topic that sometimes is studied, because when you have many symmetric solution, the resolution can be slow. So there are ways to cut some of them. But for what is for this problem here, just remember that we find one solution. So whatever is possible to, whatever is feasible, whatever we can do to send the 10 units through from the node 4 to node 7 is equivalent, right? So we have nothing in the model telling us, for example, that we have to find the shortest way. We just need to send as much as possible. That's why you have this long path. Is just by chance. It may have been the other one. For the model is equivalent, right? It's still objective function 30. Now, first activity for you is this. I want you to imagine that you are the attacker, and your task is to destroy arcs of the system with the objective of minimizing the flow. And you can destroy up to 2 arcs. So what I'm asking you is to select 2 arcs, do different tests, and see if you find a pair of arcs where the flow is reduced as much as possible. Remember that the optimal solution is to send 30. So ideally, you will find a pair where you can send maybe 20 or 10, or even, I don't know, is what you have to find out. How do you do that? Well, if you remember here, I show you that to destroy an arc, we need to put this command here. We let the capacity of that arc be 0. So I prepare for you, you should have this file, maxflowattack.run. What you have to do is to use this file and modify this to command let capacity. What you have to do is to replace the numbers inside the square bracket with the IDs of the arc that you want to destroy. So in this case, we are saying destroy 4, 7, and 2, 3. So you destroy these, and then you destroy 2, 3. If you want to destroy 4, 5, and 2, 8, you just write here 4, 5, and 2, 8. And every time you change these, you can run this file, the run file, and you will get the solution, something like that. So you can check what are the flows, and even more important, what is the objective. Can you push this below 30, right? And ideally, if you are the attacker, you will find the attack, or in this case, the pair of arcs that push this flow as low as possible, okay? So again, what is going on here is that by setting this capacity to 0, you are simulating an attack. So you are simulating a disruption of these arcs, and then you solve after that the max flow problem that we introduced, and you check the flow. So for this, I give you 10 minutes. We can come back at 10:40, and you can test and see what you find. Also, you can have a look at this network. Maybe I leave this picture here. So this was the optimal solution, right? And you can look at that, and maybe you can get some insight on which arcs you should destroy to minimize the flow as much as possible. So I'm still here. We just take a 1-minute break, but if you have any question, you can write in the chat, I can answer. So see you in 10 minutes. Maybe just one thing. If you are running Ample, remember to put all the files in the same folder. So you need to have your all the run, the mod, the .dat file, everything inside together with the Ample executable file and everything in the same folder. Otherwise, you need to specify the path for each of the files. So it's the easiest way is to put everything in the same folder, and then it should work. Okay, so I think we can continue. I hope you try the solve the. We not show you now the best solution. We do it later, but because this was just for you to start to get an idea of how the best attack is defined, or the worst attack, as I call it here. Imagine now that the attacker, so the role that you were playing earlier, is such that you can destroy gamma arcs. So gamma in your case was 2, but imagine that you can destroy any number of arcs, and this number is gamma, and the objective you have is to find out the arcs you want to destroy in order to minimize the max flow after attack. In the previous example, you had 2 arcs, the network was small, so you may even test all of them. But in practice, when you have a large network and gamma is not 2, but maybe is 10, 15, a large number, testing all the possible attacks is infeasible, because if you want to brute force all these, it will take too much. So the question is there a better way to solve this problem, the problem of the attacker that is looking for the best or the worst case attack, as I said, and how can we mathematically represent this problem? Now, if you look at the problem, the idea is that you have to decide something. You have, as an attacker, to make a choice of arcs to be destroyed. And probably by now you realize that choices in optimization are represented with variables. So let's say that the variable Zij is equal to 1 if the attacker decides to destroy arc ij. That means push the capacity to 0, as we have seen, and 0 if he decides not to do that. So the problem of the attacker can be written this way: min max total flow. So what does it mean? If you remove the mean part, that was the max flow that we studied earlier. You want to maximize the total flow, and the variables that you see the symbol below the max is f, the flow. So this was the variable that the max flow was setting, how much flow through each arc. The problem of the attacker is this: I want to minimize the max flow by deciding before the flow is sent the arc to be destroyed. And as we show here, this decision is represented by variable z. Okay, so there is, we see later about this problem of the variable already defined. So the problem of the attacker is that I want to minimize the max flow. And there is a constraint saying that the max number of arcs to be destroyed is gamma, because remember, we can destroy no more than gamma variables. Then we need another thing, is we need to tell Ample that whenever we decide to destroy an arc, the capacity is 0. And we can do this here. If you remember, there was a constraint in the problem saying that the flow cannot exceed the capacity. Now, if we multiply this capacity by 1 minus z, what does it mean? If z is equal to 1, so we decide to destroy the arc, this term is equal to 0. So the flow is less than or equal to 0, so it must be 0. If instead we decide not to destroy the arc ij, then we have the usual constraint, flow less than or equal to the capacity. So in other words, by changing the model this way, we can mathematically represent the problem of the attacker, minimize the max flow. But this is not a standard way to write a problem, because it's a min-max. We don't know how to solve a min-max problem. We only know how to solve a single minimization or a single maximization problem. But the good news is that we can reformulate this guy, the min-max, into a single min problem. And I show you how to do that. The idea is to use what is called duality. So what is duality? Duality is a technique that allows you to take a problem, a linear programming problem, in general a convex problem, but let's say a linear programming problem that is written as a max, and we can write an equivalent problem that is a mean. And if the optimal solution exists, is the same. So it means that we can take a max something, maximization problem, is a linear problem where we can find an optimal solution. So it's not infeasible, it's not unbounded, we can solve the problem. And using duality, we can write it in an equivalent way as a minimization problem, where if we solve the two problems, we get the same solution. I don't want to give you the details because it's pretty theoretical. It's not really the scope of the course, but there are a few rules to follow when you transform a problem in its dual. And I show you already in the next slide what you get when you create the dual of the max flow. What you get is what is called mean cut problem, and it looks something like that. So you see that the main structure is the same. We have the parameter, we have the variables, but then the variables are different. So we have new variables, W and Y, and also the constraint and the objective are different. So again, I don't want to give you all the explanation of what is W, what is Y, what is this problem. Just remember the main point is that if we solve this problem, this is equivalent of solving the max flow. Okay, just that this one is written in a minimization form, the max flow is written in a maximization form. So why do we want to do that? Because if we can do this, if we can represent the max flow as its dual, that is the mean cut, then we can avoid the problem of checking all the different disruption in a brute force way. Because if you look here, we take the mean max, that is the problem that the attacker needs to solve, and if we replace the inner problem, the max flow, with the mean cut, that is the dual, now instead of having a mean max, we have a mean mean. And if the mean inside can be solved, we can write this as a single minimization problem that we can solve in MPOL. So the idea is, we don't know how to solve a mean max, but if we transform the inner max into a mean using duality, this mean mean can become a single mean, and then we know how to solve a minimization problem, because this is a standard optimization problem with a standard objective function that is just either mean or max. So what happens if we do that? Well, what happens is that by solving this problem here, this single minimization problem, we are looking at a way to find, by just solving that problem, the worst case disruption. So what you try earlier to set by hand to check, for example, if I want to destroy two arcs, I want to check ideally all the possible combinations, so that then I can say, hey, this is the one providing the lowest max flow. Now we can find that by solving a single optimization problem. You don't have to solve and try all the possible combinations. In practice, what happens? We take the mean cut that I show later. We introduce the new variable z, that is the disruption. Remember, z is equal to 1 if we decide to destroy arc ij. When we have the capacity, we need to multiply the capacity by 1 minus z, because remember, if the arc is destroyed, the capacity now is 0. And we have also to say that we cannot destroy more than gamma arcs, and gamma is a parameter. In this case, it's set to 3. So in this case, we are saying you cannot, as attacker, destroy more than 3 arcs. And if you see here, there is a new keyword after the variable z. This keyword is binary. What does this mean? Binary means that the variable z can be either 0 or 1. So if you remember from the first lecture, this problem is now a mixed integer linear problem. It's not anymore a linear program. So by introducing this new layer of complexity, the role of the attacker Now the problem is more difficult because it's not a linear problem, it's a mixed integer linear problem, okay? And this is important later because unfortunately we cannot use duality anymore when we have integer variables. Again, I don't want you to understand all the details of this model here. Just remember that this is based on the max flow. We use duality to transform it into a minimization problem, and we introduce the blue stuff that is the attacker role. So the amount of arcs that can be destroyed, the decision of the attacker Z to destroy or not destroy arcs, the budget cannot destroy more than gamma, and the fact that the capacity will be 0 if the arc is destroyed. Now, there is another thing that you may have noticed. In this objective here, there are products between the variable W and the variable Z. Capacity is a parameter, is a number, is not a problem, but we have products between variable W and Z. This, in theory, will mean that the problem is also nonlinear, because if you remember the definition of linear problem, these products between variables are not compatible with the definition of linear problems. So why did I say that this is still a mixed integer linear problem? Because these products between variables can be linearized. Again, I'm not going to show you how they can be linearized, but for you to know that when you have a product between a binary and continuous variable, you can rewrite this in such a way that you still get an equivalent linear description of the product, okay? So even though there is this product between W and Z, you can still write that as a mixed integer linear problem. Now, what happens when we solve this problem by setting different values of gamma? Well, if you try, you will see that when gamma is equal to 0, that means no arc can be destroyed, we get 30. 30 is the objective function we got when we solved the max flow. And it makes sense. If I don't destroy anything, I would expect to find the same solution I found when I solved the original max flow problem. When I can destroy one arc, so gamma is equal to 1, I get a solution of 20. So 20 means that instead of sending 30 units of flow, 10 units are lost. When gamma is equal to 2, I get 10. And gamma equal to 2 is the example I asked you to solve earlier. So if by setting, when you were trying, if you found out a flow of 10, it means you found the optimal solution from the attacker's point of view. And if gamma is equal to 3, I can reduce the flow to 0. In other words, enemy just need to destroy 3 arcs of the network to push the flow to 0. By destroying 3 arcs, any way you want to send the flow, you cannot send any unit, only 0. Is this something we expect? Well, let's have a look at this solution. If you look at these, you realize that there are only 3 arcs going out from the source, and each arc has a capacity of 10. So if I can destroy one arc and I destroy one of these 3, of course I can only send 20 units, no more than 20. If I destroy 2 of them, I can only send 10, and if I destroy all of them, I cannot send anything out of the source. So it makes sense that when we set this gamma to 1, 2, 3, we got 20, 10, and 0 as optimal solution, because what the attacker is going to destroy, and what is also identified by solving the problem, is exactly this. We are destroying arcs going out from the source. So this makes sense. If you look at the picture, you realize that these solutions we found actually are correct. Now, we found out a way to identify, by solving a single optimization problem, the best attack. Is there any way to fortify the system? So what do I mean by fortify? Imagine that you are a defender. You know that there is an attacker that wants to destroy the system, and you know that after the attack is performed, you want to maximize the flow on the disrupted network. But what if you can now fortify some of the arcs of the network? So you say, for example, I have gamma arcs that I can make indestructible before the attacks take place. So the sequence is, first I decide in the network which arcs I want to make indestructible. Then the attacker will destroy the arcs that he can destroy in order to minimize the flow. And after the attack, I can maximize the flow on the disrupted network. So what is the question here? Which arcs would you choose to fortify in such a way that at the end, the max flow is as large as possible? And ideally, what you want to protect is the set of arcs that the attackers would otherwise destroy. This is the intuition, right? So if you know that the worst case attack is targeting some arcs, maybe the first idea will be to protect them. So let's do another example here. Imagine that you can fortify gamma equal to 4 arcs of this network. Okay, so you have to choose 4 arcs to fortify. And your objective is to fortify the arcs so that at the end, after the worst case disruption, the max flow is as large as possible. So you have a file called protection.run, that is this, where you can do this. You see here what you have to modify is this let and fix. I will explain you what this means. We have gamma equal to 3. This is still the number of arcs that this attacker can destroy. But now we can fix for some of the 4 arcs in this case, we can basically say that the variable z is equal to 0. So this let z and fix z means that I associate to a specific variable a value, and then I fix that, meaning it cannot be changed. So in the previous case, we were letting the capacity 0. Why we didn't fix? Because that was a parameter. It's just a number. When we associate to that value, then the value is the same because it's a parameter. But this is a variable. So we can start with a value, but then we have to say that we want to fix that value. So during the optimization, this variable is not touched. And in this case, what you have to do, similarly to the other problem, is you change the values inside the square bracket. So these 4 pairs of values, and basically these will be the 4 arcs that are protected. That means they cannot be destroyed. So what you need to do, and I can give you 20 minutes for that, or maybe we can take a 10 minutes pause before doing that. I don't know, because it's 11.
Can do that. And if anyone has a problem, we can debug during the break or just after.
Because for this, I mean, one option is to take a small pause, 10 minutes, and then I give you maybe other, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes to run this.
Okay, we can do that. No problem. Let's take a break and then we resume. And I think when we start again, maybe we can debug all the questions that is using that.
Okay, so we take 10 minutes pause first, and then we have for this activity other 10 to 15 minutes later.
Okay.
Okay. And in the meantime, because I've seen there were some questions before, if you have questions about the program or is not running, you can let me know. I can try to see why there was some issue before. In the meantime, if you want to try even during the pause, you feel free to do that. Again, the idea is that you use these let and fix commands, and then you run this run file, and then you will see a flow, and this flow will be after protecting this and after the attackers destroy the best he can, the max flow will be what you see. So we can take this 10 minutes pause, and then I'm here. If you have problems, you write me in the chat, we can try to fix them. So see you later.
But I see you also at the I can manage it. Sorry? No, this is just like software. I can bring it through like I've got the software, but I have no idea. But I can keep it kind of up because they already works in the network.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, try to ask him to stay on.
Virtually sensible makes no sense the results. Gives always the same result. No matter I change the constraints.
Okay.
For
His job is to.
try to with this one, right?
I'm trying, I'm having another problem, which is that. Anytime I try to do anything, I tell me I don't have permissions.
Good.
That's another issue, not really possible. Right. That should be more for the moment.
Sorry.
I think it's more for the moment. Yeah, that I know it's programmable. It's annoying. Are you on Zoom right now? Do you want me to ask
Me?
about your issue?
Are you talking with me?
It's possible.
Yeah.
But eventually
Okay, I think I can give you maybe up to, I don't know, 11, 20, 20, 25, let's say 11, 20 to still test the problem. The meantime, if you have any question, you write in the chat.
Is this better? I don't,
It's all in that.
okay,
I will give it a second try.
okay. Well, it's not working here either at all.
You like install the. I need one or the one with the command line. Do you know this?
I don't see a command line.
The command line.
Yeah.
Okay. Because earlier I had the other one and
Okay.
eventually.
So, well,
Yes.
I mean, it seems Max is different, but it seems to say you just put all the files somewhere and then you just go in that file with a command line and you start to type running the program, and it looks easy on paper, but with me it doesn't work. Yeah.
So it's still not working?
I will just.
Oops. Can you hear me, Alberto?
Yes.
Yeah, so for me it's not working, but that's not a problem, that's fine. I'm not sure, it doesn't have anything to do, I think, with Ample. It's, I don't know why I'm blocked from accessing this. But another student is having an issue here.
That's strange.
Yeah, so that should be.
But anyway, I mean, if maybe we can go on with the presentation first, and then we can see, because it was, I mean, it was something nice to test. I still show the result, but
Folder. That's normally the way he says to do it. Okay. So all the mods that files
Just like
on Moodle should go. So all those files here that we're using should be unzipped and put in the same folder here.
okay, and then how can you like with Ample Access? It should open.
So normally on the Ample website, they have instructions about how to start it the first time. So let me try to see what they say. So you are with Windows, command line bundle. Okay, and Ample instructions. So download an instruction bundle.
Oh, was that from this?
On
the one
the website. And then I think you are in this. So you've done this already. You put it somewhere in the computer. sw.x. So yes, exactly.
Okay.
Type AMPL. Yeah. So okay, now you've got a prompt and you can start to type the Ample command. And the
So,
commands, yes, so you need to
just max flow.
so you need to put the files in it, otherwise you won't read them.
Is it okay if I put all the files in a folder into this?
And I think they have to be really in the folder, not in the file.
I'd like just here for created a folder with all the projects.
Yeah, I think you need to put all those files directly in the Ample folder. You have initially.
Just in the download.
Yeah. I think that's how it works, yeah. So yeah.
Small.
Okay. And then so how to run the program. So to execute so it's You need to type include then max flow attack.
Should be this, right?
Yeah, that should be working. Oh, so that's the same error that I've got.
Okay.
Okay.
Seems to work. Oh, good. So you received exactly the same error?
Yeah, from Mac, I've got exactly the same problem. So, okay, we need Pascal back.
Maybe we can check later why, or is it working now?
Yes, so here we've got someone on Windows with the same issue as me, but I'm not sure exactly what to do. So it shouldn't have the ample prompt. You say we move in the folder and then we type.
I mean, if you are under Mac, what you should do is you open the terminal, not the ample term, the normal, the system terminal. Then you go inside the folder with the cd command, right? And when you are in, or you open the terminal from the folder, and when you have the terminal, you just write ample and mind the symbol of less, like the lower, like the one I show you, and then the name of the run file.
And on Windows, so what should?
And on Windows, instead, you double click, you put the file inside the ample folder where there is also the ample exe. Then you double click the ample application inside the folder. And when you are in the prompt, if you write include and then the file.run, the run file, and you click enter, it should work.
Okay, and so he did that and he had exactly the same syntax error that I had on my Mac.
That's strange. I mean, we can check later. Anyway, this was the last one to do, the last exercise to do. So maybe we can have a look later why. I don't know.
Okay.
Or we can continue first with the.
Okay, yeah, you can continue. Let's just try again.
Yeah. Okay, let me share the screen. Okay, so there were some issues with the code, but the idea was to test a few options to see if we can protect, how we can protect a network. And let's see at some solution that you may have considered. For example, the one on the screen here. You may say, look, I know that in the worst case attack, the 3 arcs going out from the source were destroyed. So it could make sense that we protect all of them and then we protect another one, for example, 4.7, right? So it makes sense. You say, look, I know what the attackers want to destroy, I protect that. Is it the best strategy? Well, maybe not. See here, if we protect the 3 arcs in green, actually the 4 arcs in green, and then the attacker can destroy 3. Remember the parameter gamma, how many arcs the attacker can destroy is still fixed to 3. You find out that the optimal flow is 10. Because the attacker can still destroy arcs 3, 7, and 9, 7 that are the arcs entering the terminal, and another one, 8, 7. So even though you protected the 3 arcs going out from the source that were the arcs destroyed by the attacker, the flow is 10. Is there a better way? Well, for example, you could instead protect these 4 arcs. 6, 9, 9, 7, 6, 3, 3, 7. So in this case, what you have done, you have protected 2 paths. So you guarantee that 20 units of flow will reach the terminal. And the worst case attack here is to somehow disrupt the last 10. So enemy could have destroyed 6, 4, but as I say, there are equivalent and symmetric solutions. Just need to find a way to avoid that these 10 units of flow that we send from 6 to 4 can reach the terminal. But what is the message here? The message here is that protecting the arcs associated with the worst case attack may not be a good strategy, even though it is intuitive. And when we fortify the network with different fortifications, the arcs that are destroyed in response by the attacker can change a lot. So if you look at this problem, it seems much easier to find out from the attacker point of view what needs to be destroyed rather than identifying the arcs that should be protected. So the task of the defender seems more challenging. And remember that this was a very small network. If you take larger networks, and sometimes you can find stuff like this, then definitely you cannot do brute force, and definitely the task of the attacker can be, the defender can be very, very hard. So what can we do to find the best way to protect the network? Can we do something like what we did, the trick of duality that we did for the attacker, instead of trying all the possibilities, using optimization to find out the best protection? Well, we can start the same way. We say, look, the decision from the defender point of view of the arcs to be defended or protected can be a variable. Let's call this variable P. And then the problem of the defender can be written like that: max, min, max, flow. So what does it mean? Starting from the left side, we want to maximize the flow by selecting some arcs P that cannot be destroyed. After we do that, the attacker wants to minimize that flow by selecting the arcs Z to be destroyed. And after that, we want to maximize the flow on the resulted network. And of course, we need to say that we cannot protect more than tau network. So tau as gamma is a parameter telling us the budget we have in terms of protecting the system. And then we need to say that the arcs that are protected cannot be destroyed. Now, how can we do that? If P is equal to 1 when the arc is protected, then by saying that Z is less than or equal to 1 minus P, we are saying that whenever P is 1, the variable Z is fixed to 0. So we cannot destroy an arc that is protected. But when P is 0, that means we are not protecting the arc, then the enemy can destroy or not, up to him, the arc. So what we manually set before with the let and fix command, in this optimization problem, we can express the relationship between protection and destruction of an arc with this last constraint. And if we take all these, we can say, well, last time we used duality. Remember, the min max became a min min that is a single min. So the max min max, the problem of the defender, if we use the same trick, is now a max min. And then you may say, hey, can we transform the inner min into a max and then we have a single max problem? Now we cannot do that. And someone in the chat was asking, the problem is that now the inner problem is integer. So when we did the trick the first time, we transformed the max flow into its dual. The max flow, the basic problem, is a linear problem. There is no integer variable there. So we can use duality to get an equivalent problem. But now that we want to transform this dual problem here, we have the variable Z that are already binary. So binary, yes, is integer, right? It's just a subclass of integer, but the fact that we have integer variables means that we cannot use duality to transform these into a single problem. In other words, we cannot reduce this problem of the defender into a single optimization problem. And this is also, if you want, related to what we already observed, that it seems harder to solve the problem of the defender than solving the problem of the attacker. So the question is, how can we solve this max-min problem if we cannot use duality? And the idea is that in this case, we need to define an algorithm that can solve this specific problem. I don't want to show here the details of these algorithms, but just to give you an intuition what this algorithm does. So the idea is that you solve in sequence two kinds of optimization problems. So it's like an iterative algorithm where one iteration you are looking at the best fortification. So you are solving the max P given a set of attacks. And then you look for a new fortification, sorry, a new attack given the fortification. In other words, it's like saying, what is the worst case attack currently? And then we find the worst case attack. And then we say, let's protect against that. And with this protection, let's find a new worst case attack. And when we find that, then we want to find a new fortification for these two attacks that we found. And you keep iterating like that until you reach a convergence point. You reach a termination where you find the best fortification for the attacks. But again, this is not part of the course. If you want to find more about this algorithm, I put here two papers. I can also share, if you are interested, the PDFs. But the idea is that this is not a problem that we can solve in MPOL by just running simplex and getting the solution, because there are two levels, right? The max min cannot be reduced to a single maximization problem. So we need to define a specific algorithm to address this formulation. Now, what is resilience in this context? Because what we have seen so far is the maximization of the flow, the max flow. We have seen how an attacker can interact with this problem to find the worst case attack, so the arcs to be destroyed in order to minimize the flow. And also we have seen from a defender perspective, of course, using an algorithm that, if you want to find the details, you can find them in the papers I just mentioned. But from the defender point of view, the idea is to identify a set of arcs that can be protected. That means attacker cannot destroy them, such that after the attack, the flow I can get is as good as possible. In this context, what is resilience? So let's start with some assumptions first. First thing is that attacker and defender are rational. What do I mean by that? It means they do the best they can, and also they know what the others is doing. So the attackers know that the defender is trying to maximize the flow after that. And also the defender knows that the attacker is going to destroy the arcs in such a way that the total flow is as low as possible. So they are not random in such a way. They are not attacks and like the attacks and the protection actions are not random. They are doing the best they can to achieve the objective that for the defender is maximize the flow, and for the attacker is minimize the flow. We assume also to have an available algorithm to solve the defender problem. That is what I mentioned in the previous slide, the algorithm that you find in the papers. So let's assume that there is a strategy to solve that max min max flow, to find out the arcs to be protected if we want to achieve the best possible flow. And also we know the number of arcs that the defender can protect, the parameter tau, right? In this example, it was 4, right? So the tau 4 means we can protect 4 arcs. So this is known. And the defender, this is another important assumption. Let's assume that the defender may not want to achieve the max flow, the best possible flow. But let's say that he wants just to achieve something above some threshold. Because when you have a disruption, maybe you say, look, you know what? Okay, even if I can achieve 80% of the total flow that I have, if there is nothing going, no attacks, I'm still happy. So let's say that there is this threshold where the defender just wants to achieve that. Whatever is more is fine, but the objective is not to get the maximum possible flow after attack. Just make sure we can achieve this value of phi. What is the challenge here? The defender may not know what is the attacker's budget gamma. So the defender may not know how many arcs the attacker can destroy. And you will find in the literature many algorithms and many papers where this assumption does not hold. where people say, if the attacker can destroy like 10 arcs, this is the best fortification. What is the problem here? That this information is often private. Imagine you are defending a system against a terrorist attack. It may be very hard to know how many resources the enemy has got, because this is not an information that is easily available. So in this context, knowing this assumption and knowing that we don't know the attacker's budget, how can we define resilience? And this is a way to define resilience. And it's different from what you have seen so far, I guess, but let me explain the meaning of this. The meaning of this is the following. We want to find the maximum attacker's budget, gamma, that is what we don't know. We want to find the maximum attacker budget such that in the worst case, we can still guarantee a flow above the threshold fee. In other words, we want to make it as expensive as possible for the attacker to destroy the system, to push the flow below fee. Okay, so instead of saying we assume to know the budget of the attacker and then we maximize the flow the best we can, we say no, we want to guarantee a flow above a threshold. What is the maximum enemy budget so that we can achieve this? Right, so imagine that you find that in the previous example, the resilience is equal to 5. What would this mean? It will mean that with the fortification we find by solving this problem, if the enemy can destroy 0 to 5 arcs, we can still guarantee that the flow is above the threshold. If the enemy can destroy more than 5, then we cannot guarantee that anymore. But at least we are pushing that in such a way that enemy need to spend as much resources as possible to push our flow below the threshold fee. And this is the way we quantify resilience here. Okay, so it's different from, maybe you have seen previously in this course, concept like the area under the resilience curve and things like that. Here we are looking at, in a way, the magnitude of the attack that the system can tolerate. So here you have the same concept. I wrote a few points here. So R is the maximum attacker budget so that we can find a fortification that guarantees after the worst case attack a flow not smaller than phi, is what I just say. We want to maximize the amount of budget that the attacker needs if he wants to push the flow below the threshold fee. And of course, if the budget of the attacker is larger than this resilience value, we cannot guarantee the flow anymore. And we want to protect against as many high impact disruption as possible. So we want to make sure that the attackers need to spend a lot of resources, because imagine destroying an arc may be associated with the money that the attackers need to use to destroy. Maybe if he's a terrorist, I don't know, buy some whatever, I don't know, disruption. It can be an air attack or whatever, but it means investing resources, right? Okay, and the other way we can see this resilience concept is that we want to make it as hard as possible for the attacker to win. So we have turned the challenge of not knowing what is the budget of the attacker into our resilience. Now the budget that the attackers need to use becomes our resilience. So we solve two problems. How to take into account the fact that we don't know the attackers of the budget, the budget of the attacker, and also how to define the resilience in this context. So is there any question here? Because I know that this idea of resilience may be a little different from what you have seen so far. But again, the main concept is that instead of focusing on some performance, and the area under the curve is fine, is a good way to quantify resilience in some applications. But here, if you see, we don't have really a time component in this problem. We assume that everything is happening in real time. So there is a protection, attacks, and max flow. So instead of looking at the time component, we are looking at the magnitude of the attack. Because when you have the area under the curve, usually they refer to one disruption. But the question is, how can we take into account the other dimension? So the fact that there are possibly many disruptions that can happen. And instead of looking at the best way to address a single disruption, here we are looking at the way to address the worst case disruptions. So that's why the robust optimization is used, because this idea of looking at the worst case, like this minimization over Z, is what usually we do in robust optimization. And in some applications, it may not make sense. In others, yes. Like a robust optimization approach can be too conservative sometimes. But if you're looking at, for example, a nuclear power plant, then of course, maybe you are more interested in avoiding the worst case event rather than hoping that on average things will go well. Because in that case, the consequence of the worst case event may not be something you can tolerate. So the question before going to the conclusion and summarizing what we have learned is this definition of resilience clear? At least the idea, what we are trying to achieve with this definition of resilience. Is there any question on this concept of, because it may be counterintuitive that the resilience is maximizing the budget of the attacker. What we need to understand is that we are not maximizing the budget of the attacker. We are actually making as expensive as possible for the attacker to push the flow below the threshold fee that is what we want. Okay, so if there is no question on that, let's go to the conclusions and see what we have learned in these two lectures. So you have learned a lot, so congratulations for reaching this point already. You have learned the basic of optimization. If you remember the first lecture, we have seen what are optimization problems. We have seen the basics of linear and integer programming. So the concept of how to characterize an optimization problem. Remember, there is the objective function, the constraint, and the variables, and the parameters or data. What is linear and integer programming? So the difference with integer is that some of the variables are integer. How to use Ample and Cplex to solve integer and linear problems. I know there were some challenges with the code, but at least I hope you understood the main idea. We can write with Ample an optimization problem, and then we can use a solver like Cplex to get the optimal solution. And maybe later, even after the course, we can try to, you can send me an email or I will coordinate with Elaine to find out why the code was not working. Because someone else in the chat told me that it was working for him on Windows, so we can find out what was not working. Then you have seen the max flow problem. So the max flow was the example we use in this course to present to implement what we learn about optimization, Ample and Cplex. And then we have also introduced the concept of duality, that is a way to find the worst case attack in a max flow by solving a single problem. Okay, so remember, duality works when you have a linear problem, not an integer problem. So it must be a linear problem that you can solve. So a linear problem for which a solution exists. And then if it's a mean or a max, you can convert it to a max or a mean, and you find the same solution. And also an alternative definition of resilience, that is the one I presented in the previous slide, where you find the resilience not as the area under the curve or other metric, but rather you define the resilience as the amount of resources that an attacker or an enemy needs to use to destroy your system, and you want to maximize that using some protection strategy. If you want to know more, there is a website where there are some videos explaining the basics of optimization in Ample, and is a little more detailed. So if you are interested, you can look at that. And then the two papers I mentioned were this idea of resilience is illustrated, and you can find also more information on the algorithm that I share. The first one is applied to power grid fortification. The second one is more a theoretical work. So you can have a look, and if you need a PDF, I can also share with you. And anything else, you can send me an email here. The slides, of course, will be available later. So that's more or less all for the course. What we can do now is maybe in the last 10 minutes or so, if you have any questions about the course, the content, maybe something was not clear, I can try to answer to that. So maybe, yeah, we can take these last 10 minutes for Q&A. Okay,
Yeah,
Tyler?
Tyler?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
There is,
Can you hear me?
yes.
I'm curious to know of any instances. Do you know of any, I guess, organizations, any companies that are using this for more than research purposes? And when I say this, I mean,
Yes, I can give you two examples. If you are you referring to optimization in general, or?
I mean Ample, and like specifically using this specific platform.
Oh, Ample. Okay. Ample. Well, let's say that there are different companies use different software. It may be that they use Ample as well. The thing is that Ample needs a license. It's not very expensive. Actually, it's a few $100s. What usually happens is that you use Ample to derive the model and to test quickly. And then if you need to do some implementation that is maybe you want to be more efficient in terms of time required, maybe really you are looking at problems that are very large, you need to do something more sophisticated, then you can do implementation in Python or C++ even. It also depends on how available you want your make to be, the code to be, because if I want to share an open source code, probably it's easier to do it in Python rather than Ample. Is used a lot in research, but there are, if you look at the Ample website, I think they have a section where they also have some industrial cases where Ample was used. I remember there was someone also on LinkedIn. I think it was the Ample page on LinkedIn. Sometimes they put some testimonial kind of companies that use Ample to solve their problems. The reason why I choose Ample here instead of other software, as I mentioned at the beginning, is that probably is good for focusing on the modeling and keeping aside all the programming challenges that you may have. But from my point of view, I like Ample because you can like you have seen something simple here, but in the RAM file, you can also write a lot of things that you can write with other software. Like if you have a for loop, if you have a while loop, you can have formatting of the output. All these things that you can do with other software like Python or C, you can do also in Ample. Of course, you don't have the capability. You cannot access the memory directly like C, for example, these no. But I think it's a good trade-off if you don't have problems to solve where the speed is really crucial. And for the majority of the problem, it's not that you use C instead of Ample, because the bottleneck often is the complexity of the problem. So if Cplex take 10 hours, it's not that because you switch from Ample to C that you suddenly solve the problem in 10 minutes. The bottleneck is often the problem to be solved rather than the language that you use to solve the problem, to model the problem.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Was there all
Okay, Dominic, why does time complexity matter for static network? Isn't it enough to calculate it once? I guess you refer to what I said earlier, that like when you increase the size, it can be challenging. The thing is this: even for a static network where you need to solve it only once, because the problem is a mixed integer linear problem, and someone in the chat earlier said that this is often NP-hard. The issue is that when you scale up, imagine you have a big network, you need to solve it only once, yes, but it's so big that you cannot even solve it once in like a reasonable time. Sometimes you say, hey, the network is a medium size, okay, I can run the code for like even a few days, I find the solution, great, fine. However, sometimes when you scale up, and because it's exponential in nature, you may have instances where you cannot even find a solution before your memory is over, or even you go to a server, or you have to go to high performance computing to find a solution. So the complexity is not crucial in many applications here, but depending on the size of the problem you want to solve, it can become a challenge. And that's why you may need then to resort to heuristics or other approaches if you really cannot solve the problem. So usually what I do in this kind of problems is, first, let's try to see if the problem you have can be solved in a reasonable amount of time, because as you said, the network is static. In theory, you just need to solve it once. And let's say that I can even take 1 week to solve the problem, is fine. Okay, if I can do it, fine. If the problem is too big and you cannot even solve it in 1 month, then maybe there is some other things to be done. You can try to look at the assumption you have, or maybe design some heuristics or some other way to solve the problem. But by default, what I will do is exactly what you say. Don't focus too much on the time complexity, run the code, find the solution. Even if it's taking a long time, it's fine, because we just need to solve it once. Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, so I think if there's no further question, we can close the session here. So on our side, we solved all the problems, so it's running.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, so thanks.
So maybe you let me know later by mail what was the problem, because I mean, what you did to solve, because for some people told me that it was working, for me it was working. Maybe we can check later by mail.
Yeah, I'll try to think what it was that
yeah, sometimes it's a small detail, and then
Okay, no worries. Okay, I'll email. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. And for the other student, he's on Windows, so I'm not familiar, but he found a way of making it work also. So
Okay,
I think he
that's
had to
good.
move the Cplex file somewhere else, and that kind of worked.
Well, unless they change from the last time I tried, they changed the location of the files, it may be. I don't know.
Not sure, but
Okay. Anyway, good that is
as long as it
working.
works, I think we're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Alberto.
Thank you. Have a nice
Bye.
day.
You too.
And
Good evening.
yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.